Hello and welcome to an Envato Tuts Plus tutorial. I'm Adi Purdila, and in this video I'll show you how to create responsive SVG images. More specifically, I'll show you how to create this SVG logo that changes its format according to the medium it's displayed on. On small screens, we see a minimal version of the logo, while on large screens, we see the full thing. This technique can be applied to any SVG image. It doesn't necessarily have to be a logo. It can be an illustration, for example. Now, here's a breakdown of what you'll learn in this tutorial. First, we'll create our logo in Adobe XD. Then, we'll export the necessary SVG code. And finally, we'll build the actual SVG file of the responsive logo. For this demo, I went with the castle logo that you can find on Envato Elements. The link will be down below. And I went for this because we can have different formats. We can have the single illustration, we can have the illustration plus text, text on the bottom, we can put the text on the side. So there are a lot of things we can do with this logo. Now, obviously, this is a demo. You would be using your own logo when you create this, but I think showing you how to make a responsive logo out of this one will give you a good understanding of the entire process. So what I did was I downloaded the logo, and then I went to Adobe XD. Of course, you can use any kind of software you want for this, and I basically separated the elements. I have the icon here in its own artboard, I have the type in another artboard, and then I created three versions. I have the full version, I have a landscape version, and then I have a square version with just the symbol. So, for example, on large screens, I can use the full version. On slightly smaller screens, maybe some that don't have a lot of vertical space, I can use the landscape version of the logo. And then on maybe small screens like mobile devices, I can use the square version. All right, so these are the three logos that we're going to use. Now, the next step is to export all of our SVG assets. Now, if we look at these three logos, you'll see that all of them are made up out of these two components. So we have the icon and the type. Now, these are actually the only ones that we're going to export, because we're going to build these three logos out of these two components when we write the actual SVG code. And that's going to allow us to create that responsiveness we're talking about. So in XD, it's really easy to export. Simply select the artboard, hit Command E, and then you can choose the folder that you want to export them. Make sure you select SVG. You can skip optimize file size, minify. We're going to do that separately. So I already went ahead and did that. I have an icon SVG that looks like this, and a type SVG that looks like this. Now, the next step is to clean up these SVGs, because by default, when you export an SVG from a software like XD, it's going to have a lot of stuff that you don't really need. So a very quick way to optimize that file and remove all the unnecessary things is to use something called SVG OMG. It's basically a tool that allows you to minify and clean up SVG files. So we're going to hit Open SVG, and I'm going to open up Icon SVG. We can see a preview of it here. We can set the precision like all the way to 8. You can see the gain here. It goes from 700 bytes to 531 bytes. And here you can go ahead and choose what to remove. In my case, I'm going to leave these on by default, except I don't want to clean the IDs. So I'm going to uncheck that. And once I'm done, hit download. And I'm going to create a new folder here called Clean SVG. I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to repeat the process for the type. So I'm going to leave exactly the same options, download into my clean folder. So now if we take a look in the clean SVG, you'll see that they look exactly the same, but they lack some of the unnecessary things that you would find in a normal SVG. And just to demonstrate that, I'm going to open up the original icon SVG in a code editor, and this is what it looks like. And I'm going to open up the clean version. So this is the difference between these two. So now that we have all of the assets ready to go, it's time to create the actual logos. We're going to create a new file, and we're going to save it as responsive logo.svg. All right, we'll start with this SVG. We're going to give it a width and height of 100%. We're not going to worry too much about how big it is right now. We're not even going to give it a view box value, because we always want it to be like as big as it can go, and then we can scale it down later on. Here we're going to add the namespace declaration of XMLNS and the Xlink. These are basically a namespace and a namespace prefix, and they enable us to use the href attribute further down the line. It's a bit technical. Basically, you have to use these in order to make it work. All right, and let's close the SVG, and then inside we're going to define a few symbols. This is how we're going to make this whole thing work. Every instance of or every component of the SVG will be declared as a symbol. So we start here, symbol. We're going to give it an ID of icon, and for the view box, we're going to get the exact measurements from XD, and in our case, it's 60 by 60, right? So the view box is going to be 0, 0, 60, 60, and we're going to close the symbol, and then inside, we're going to get the actual SVG of the icon. All right, we're going to ignore the clip path that you see here. Instead, we're only going to get the paths starting from here. All right, we don't even need that group. So I'm going to get that, paste that in, and now as you can see, we have two paths that were generated from XD. Next, we're going to move on to the type. Again, we're going to define a symbol. So just to make things a little bit faster, let's go ahead and paste this. We're going to call it type. The view box is going to be 180 by 50. And for the path, or the actual contents, I'm going to start here and copy this all the way down to here. And I'm going to paste that in. Now, if we're going to open this SVG in a browser, yeah, nothing happens basically, because all we did so far was declare a couple of symbols. But we'll make stuff show up really, really soon. Next, we need to create two of our logos. We need to create the landscape version, and we need to create the full version. The square version, we already have it because it's exactly the same as the icon. For that, we're going to declare two more symbols. So the first symbol is going to be for landscape. The view box will get from XD, it's 274 by 75. So we're going to change this to 274 by 75. The only difference is, instead of directly declaring a path, we're going to create a use tag. So we're going to say use xlink href equals hashtag icon. And then I'm going to say x equals y equals, and also we're going to give it a width and a height. So what does this mean? Basically, we're saying use my icon symbol that I defined right here. and we're going to set X, Y, width, and height for it. So on the landscape version, where exactly is my icon positioned? Well, it's at 0, 0, and it has a height or a width of 75 and a height of 75. So we're going to input those exact values. 0, 0, 75, 75. Here we're basically recreating the SVGs that we saw in XD only by using code. So what else do we have in the landscape? We also have the type, right? We also have this symbol. So again, we're going to use this bit, type, and now let's see the type here. The X is at 94, Y at 12, and then width 180, height 50. So let's do that. X 94, 12, width is 180, and height is 50. And let's also close these tags so I don't forget. And that is the landscape. Still, we cannot see anything because all we're doing now is declaring a couple of symbols, but later on we're gonna use this tag to actually display the logos on our canvas. Now let's go ahead and create our final symbol, which is the full version of the logo. So I'm gonna call this full, and the full version is 180 by 150. So make sure we change the view box to reflect that. And then we're going to also use the icon and the type, but with different values. So the icon is sitting at 42 to 0 on the XY, 42, 0. And the width and height are also changed. They're 92 right now, so let's change that as well. And the type now sits at 0, 100, so 0, 100, and height or width height is the same, 150, 180, and 50. All right, now let's go ahead and show these logos or these symbols on our canvas. So we're going to say use. We're going to give it a class. This will need for the media queries later on, xlink href, and we're going to link to the icon symbol that we defined earlier. And let's set x 0, y 0. This really depends on where you want to show the logo. Width and height is, I believe, 60. Yes, 60. So 60, height 60. So now when we save, don't forget to auto close, refresh, and there you have it, our first logo. Let's do the same for the other two logos. We have the landscape version. This references to landscape. I'm going to do the same, XY 0 width. We're going to set it to the appropriate value, to 74 by 75. That's correct. And finally, the full version will reference full. XY 0 width is going to be, let's see, where is it? 180 by 150. Okay, so now when we refresh, you'll see that all of the versions, all the logo versions, are currently sitting one on top of the other. So once we have this, it's actually super simple to display them on a media query basis, right? So here on the top, I'm going to embed a style in the SVG, and I can basically say the following. By default, the landscape and the full versions, I'm going to set visibility to hidden. So that's only going to show the square version. Then we're going to write a media query. I'm going to say media, screen, and let's say that when the screen has a minimum width of 500 pixels, I want my square to disappear, so square visibility hidden, and I want my landscape to be visible. So landscape, visibility, visible. All right. So now when I resize my window, or let's actually open up the responsive mode here. When I'm going to resize this and I go below 500 pixels in width, my logo changes. When I go over, it changes to the landscape version. And let's add a third media query. I'm actually going to duplicate this. Let's say that when I go beyond 1200 pixels, I want the square and landscape to be hidden, and I want my full version to be visible. Let's do a refresh, and now you'll see that when I go past 1200 pixels, which is this, the full version is up, and then when I scale it down, it's going to change to landscape, and then when I go even further down, it's going to change to my square. Right? And that's how you can create a responsive SVG image. Now, what you can do with this is you basically take the SVG, save it, upload it to a server of your choosing, and then you can simply say img src equals your path to responsive SVG or responsive logo dot SVG, and it's going to be displayed just like any normal image, with the added bonus that it's going to adapt or change its format according to the medium it's displayed on. And that's because we wrote it like this. We embedded that CSS, we created those symbols, we created the individual logos from our two components, and with the power of the media queries, we can choose when to display one version or the other. And there you have it. It's a pretty simple way of creating a responsive SVG. You will find links to all of the assets that you saw here today, as well as some extra ones down in the lesson notes. And as I was saying in the beginning, you will most likely use this technique for creating responsive logos, but you're not limited to that. In fact, we would be very interested in hearing what you would use it for. Let us know down in the comments. Also, if you know of any other technique for achieving this effect. With that said, thank you very much for watching this tutorial. I'm Adi Pordila, and until next time, take care.